My 8-month-old baby was sleeping in his stroller on the front porch. It was a quiet afternoon. I was inside the door watching him. Then Karen from the HOA came walking fast up the driveway. She was yelling about loud tools and safety rules. She saw my chainsaw on the porch. I used it earlier to cut tree branches. Before I could stop her, she picked up the chainsaw. She pulled the cord to start it. The engine made a loud noise. Then she threw it hard toward the stroller. The spinning chainsaw flew in the air and landed very close to my baby's head. My baby woke up and cried very loud because he was scared. I ran out fast and turned off the chainsaw. Karen stood there with a mean smile. She thought she did a good thing. She did not know the angry man running to her was a fire department captain. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me where you are watching from, and please hit subscribe for more stories where the good guys always win. My 8-month-old baby was sleeping in his stroller on the front porch. He had fallen asleep the way he always did. Slowly, peacefully, one tiny fist curled against his blanket, the other resting near his cheek like he'd forgotten to move it. His chest rose and fell in that soft, steady rhythm that parents learn to watch without even realizing they're doing it. I was just inside the house, standing by the screen door, not hovering, not distracted, watching. The afternoon was quiet in the way suburban afternoons usually are. Distant lawnmowers, a bird calling from somewhere down the block, the low hum of a car passing far away. Sunlight stretched across the porch boards in warm stripes, stopping just short of the stroller's wheels. Everything felt normal, safe. I had used the chainsaw earlier that day to cut a few dead branches hanging over the driveway. It sat on the porch near the wall, powered off, chained still, exactly where I'd left it while I cleaned up the yard. I hadn't even thought about it again. Why would I? Then Karen from the HOA came walking fast up the driveway. She didn't wave. She didn't call out. She marched. Her steps were sharp and angry, her shoulders stiff, her mouth already moving before she reached the porch. I recognized that walk immediately. Everyone in the neighborhood did. It was the walk she used when she came to correct someone. She started yelling before she was halfway up the drive. "You can't have that kind of equipment out in the open." She snapped. "This is a safety violation." I pushed the door open. "Ma'am," I said calmly, stepping onto the porch. "My baby is sleeping. You need to lower your voice." She didn't even look at him. Her eyes went straight to the chainsaw. "That thing is dangerous," she said sharply. "There are rules about loud tools and hazards." "It's off," I replied. "And you're on my property." Karen ignored that too. She stepped onto the porch without asking. That was the moment my instincts kicked in. The quiet, trained part of my brain that never fully shuts off, even at home. Something was wrong. Not loud wrong. Not dramatic. Just wrong. "Please step back," I said. She didn't. She reached for the chainsaw. "Don't touch that," I said, sharper now. Before I could cross the last few steps between us, she grabbed the handle and yanked the starter cord. The engine roared to life. The sudden noise shattered the quiet afternoon like glass breaking. My baby stirred in the stroller. The chainsaw vibrated violently in her hands, loud and aggressive, completely out of place on a peaceful porch with a sleeping child. "Turn that off," I shouted. Karen didn't. She took 2 quick steps forward. Then she threw it. Not dropped, not shoved aside. Threw. The running chainsaw flew through the air in a spinning arc. Time slowed. I saw the stroller. I saw the blanket. I saw my baby's face start to scrunch as the noise reached him. The chainsaw landed hard on the porch board, skidding and bouncing to a stop just inches from the stroller's front wheel. My baby woke up screaming. A raw, frightened cry that punched the air out of my lungs. I ran. I don't remember crossing the porch. I don't remember my feet hitting the boards. I just remember my hands slamming down on the chainsaw, fumbling for the switch, killing the engine in a burst of silence that felt almost as loud as the roar had been. I grabbed the stroller and pulled it back, my hands shaking as I checked my baby over again and again. He was crying, terrified, but unharmed. I scooped him up, holding him tight against my chest, feeling his heart racing through his tiny ribs. "It's okay," I whispered. "Daddy's here. I've got you." Behind me, Karen laughed. Not nervous laughter, not shock, a short, satisfied laugh. "There," she said. "Problem solved." I turned slowly. She stood in the middle of my porch, arms crossed, chin lifted, like she had just finished a job she was proud of. "That tool was dangerous," she continued. I removed the hazard. You created one, I said, my voice low and shaking with contained rage. She rolled her eyes. People like you never take safety seriously, she said. That's why the HOA exists. Neighbors had started coming outside now. Doors opened. Someone shouted, "What happened?" Another voice said, "Is the baby okay?" Karen didn't seem to notice. She was still smiling, still convinced she was untouchable. I shifted my baby higher against my shoulder, feeling his grip tighten in my shirt as he cried. The sound cut through everything, through anger, through adrenaline, through thought. Something in me hardened. I stepped forward. "Get off my porch," I said. Karen scoffed. "You don't give orders," she replied. "I enforce rules." I reached into my pocket. Slowly, deliberately, I pulled out my badge. "I'm a fire department captain," I said, "and what you just did could have killed my child." Her smile vanished. For the first time since she walked up the driveway, Karen looked uncertain. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, getting closer. She opened her mouth to argue. No words came out, and that was when she realized. She had made a terrible mistake. My baby's cry filled the porch. It wasn't the normal cry, the one that meant hunger or discomfort or a wet diaper. This cry was sharp and broken, pulled straight from fear. His small body trembled against my chest, his fists clutching my shirt like he was trying to anchor himself to the only thing he trusted. I held him tighter, turning my body so my back was toward Karen, shielding him without even thinking about it. Every instinct I had narrowed down to one purpose: keep him safe, keep him breathing, keep him calm. "Shh. Daddy's here," I whispered, rocking him gently, even though my arms were shaking. "You're okay. You're okay." He wasn't convinced. His cries rose and fell, desperate and uneven, his face red and wet with tears. Each sound felt like it tore something open inside my chest. I checked him again, his head, his arms, his legs, my hands moving fast but careful, trained to look for danger even when panic tried to take over. He was scared, but he was alive. Behind me, Karen cleared her throat loudly. "Well?" she said. I fixed the issue. I turned slowly. She was still standing on my porch, still smiling, not a nervous smile, not confusion. It was the kind of smile people wear when they expect approval, when they believe they've done something necessary and are waiting to be thanked for it. "You almost hit my baby with a running chainsaw," I said. She waved a dismissive hand. "It didn't hit him," she replied. "You're exaggerating." My jaw tightened. "It landed inches from his stroller," I said. "You turned it on. You threw it." Karen crossed her arms. "That tool was a hazard," she said firmly. "You left it unattended near a child." I intervened. I stared at her. For a moment, I honestly couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You intervened," I repeated. "Yes," she said. "Someone had to." My baby cried harder, startled again by the raised voices. I turned away from her, bouncing him gently, trying to soothe him. His cries softened into sobs, his breathing uneven but slowly beginning to settle. That was when the neighbors arrived. Mrs. Keller from across the street hurried up first, her robe half-tied, her phone still in her hand. "Oh my God," she said when she saw my baby. "Is he okay?" "He's alive," I said. "That's because I was right here." Her eyes snapped to Karen. "What did you do?" Mrs. Keller demanded. Karen straightened. "I enforced safety rules," she said, crisply. "That chainsaw was—" "You threw it," Mrs. Keller cut in. "I saw you throw it." Karen hesitated for half a second. Then she shrugged. It was the fastest way to remove the danger. More people gathered now, Mr. Donnelly from 2 houses down, a young couple pushing a stroller of their own, someone filming from the sidewalk, someone else calling 911, their voice shaking as they tried to explain what they'd just witnessed. Karen noticed the phones. Her smile tightened. "Recording without consent is against HOA guidelines," she snapped. That was when a man laughed, a short, incredulous laugh from the edge of the crowd. "You just threw a chainsaw at a baby," he said. "And you're worried about guidelines?" Karen turned toward him sharply. "You don't understand," she said. "I was preventing an accident." "That was the accident," someone else replied. My baby finally stopped screaming long enough to catch a breath. His small body still shook, but his cries faded into soft whimpers as he buried his face into my shoulder. I felt a hand touch my arm. Mrs. Keller again. Here, she said softly, holding out a blanket. Wrap him. He's cold. I nodded my thanks and wrapped my son tighter, feeling his warmth against me, grounding myself in the simple fact that he was still here. Karen stepped forward. Don't crowd me, she said sharply to the neighbors. This is HOA business. No, I said. My voice surprised even me. It was steady, low, final. This stopped being HOA business the moment you picked up that chainsaw. Karen looked at me, really looked at me, like she was seeing me for the first time, not as a homeowner she could intimidate, but as a father standing between her and his child. You're overreacting, she said. Nothing happened. I took one step closer. My child was sleeping, I said. You turned on a power tool and threw it at him. That is not nothing. Her eye. S flicked to the neighbors again, to the phones, to the man still on the phone with emergency services. She adjusted her posture. I was concerned for safety, she said loudly, as if volume could turn the story in her favor. Any responsible person would have acted. No responsible person would do that, Mrs. Keller snapped. Karen's face flushed. You people always take things out of context, she said. That's why rules exist. That's why enforcement exists. I felt my baby's breathing slow. Each small rise and fall of his chest steadied me. I shifted him slightly so his head rested under my chin, his ear pressed against my heartbeat. He listened. He always did. The sound calmed him more than anything else. Sirens sounded in the distance, not loud yet, but unmistakable. Karen heard them too. Her head snapped toward the sound, then back to me. You called the fire department? She demanded. I didn't have to, I said. They're coming anyway. She scoffed. You think uniforms scare me? She said. I deal with city officials all the time. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The sirens grew louder, closer. Karen shifted her weight, suddenly less comfortable, suddenly aware that this situation had moved beyond her control. She glanced back toward her driveway, toward her house, as if considering retreat for the first time. It was too late. The first engine turned onto our street, lights flashing but siren cutting off as it slowed. Firefighters jumped down, scanning the scene instantly. Chainsaw on the porch, stroller pulled back, baby in my arms. Neighbors gathered. One of them looked at me, then at my badge, then back at Karen. Captain, he said. I nodded once. Secure the scene, I replied. Karen's mouth opened, closed. Her authority, whatever she thought she had, evaporated in that instant. My baby stirred, lifting his head slightly. Daddy? He whimpered. I pressed my cheek against his hair. I'm here, I said. It's over. And for the first time since the chainsaw roared to life, I believed it. The fire engine rolled onto the street without its siren. Just lights. Red washing over the houses, white flashing across faces. It slowed as it approached my driveway, tires crunching softly on the curb. The moment the engine stopped, the street seemed to hold its breath. My baby had finally quieted, not asleep yet, just exhausted. His cries had faded into small, hiccuping breaths as he clutched my shirt with surprising strength. I could feel his heartbeat through his tiny chest, still fast, still uneven, but steady. Alive. That was all that mattered. Karen noticed the fire truck the same moment I did. Her shoulders stiffened. She took a half step back, then caught herself and straightened again, lifting her chin like she always did when authority arrived. She believed, truly believed, that authority belonged to her by default. Firefighters jumped down from the engine. Boots hit pavement in practiced rhythm. One of them scanned the porch, his eyes landing instantly on the chainsaw lying where it had skidded to a stop. Another took in the stroller, the neighbors, the phones recording everything. Then one of them looked at me. Captain, he said. Just one word. Karen froze. The world didn't stop, but something shifted. The firefighter walked toward me, his voice calm, controlled, professional. You okay, sir? He asked. I nodded once. My child is safe, I said, because I was close enough to stop it. His eyes moved to the baby in my arms, then back to the chainsaw. Who started it? He asked. Karen answered before I could. I did, she said quickly, but only because it was dangerous. Every head turned toward her. The firefighter looked at her for a long second. You started a chainsaw on a porch with a child present? He asked. Karen Cross? Ed, her arms. Yes, she said. And I removed it from the area. You threw it, someone in the crowd said. Karen snapped her head around. That's not relevant, she replied sharply. The firefighter didn't look away from her. It's very relevant, he said. Another firefighter approached, crouching slightly to get a better look at the chainsaw without touching it. It's hot, he said. Recently running. Karen's jaw tightened. I told you, she said. I was dealing with a safety violation. I adjusted my grip on my baby, feeling his body relax just a little as the sound of calm voices replaced shouting. I stepped forward. Enough, I said. My voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. I'm the fire department captain for this district, I continued. And what you did violates every basic rule of fire safety. Karen laughed. Short, defensive. You don't get to lecture me, she snapped. I enforce safety standards here. I met her eyes. No, I said. You don't. The firefighter beside me glanced at Karen, then back to me. You want us to secure the scene? He asked. Yes, I said. And keep her away from my child. Two firefighters moved immediately, positioning themselves between Karen and the porch. Not aggressive, just firm. Karen looked from one to the other. You can't block me, she protested. This is my neighborhood. One of them answered calmly, not right now. Karen opened her mouth to argue, then stopped. She was starting to realize something. The crowd wasn't reacting the way it usually did. No one was backing her up. No one was nodding along. No one was afraid. Neighbors stood with arms crossed, faces tight with anger. Phones were still up, recording everything. A woman near the sidewalk held her own baby closer to her chest, eyes locked on Karen with open disbelief. Police sirens sounded next, closer now. Karen heard them and turned sharply toward the sound. You called the police? She demanded. I didn't have to, I said. They were already on the way. Her confidence wavered, just slightly. But enough. The first patrol car pulled up behind the fire engine, lights flashing. An officer stepped out, hand resting near his belt, eyes immediately assessing the scene. What do we have? He asked. I answered. She activated a chainsaw and threw it toward a sleeping infant, I said. Multiple witnesses. The officer looked at Karen, then at the chainsaw, then at the baby in my arms. Is the child injured? He asked. No, I said. Because I stopped it in time. Karen scoffed. So nothing happened, she said. Exactly my point. The officer's gaze hardened. Something did happen, he replied. It just didn't end worse because of him. He nodded toward me. Karen started talking faster now. I was trying to prevent an accident, she insisted. That chainsaw was a hazard. Anyone with common sense would agree. A man from the crowd spoke up. My common sense says you don't throw power tools at babies. A ripple of agreement moved through the group. Karen's face flushed. You're all emotional, she snapped. You don't understand enforcement. The officer raised a hand. Ma'am, he said, I need you to stop talking. She didn't. You people never respect authority, she continued. That's the problem. That's why neighborhoods fall apart. The officer stepped closer. Authority doesn't work like that, he said calmly. Especially not when it puts a child in danger. Karen finally went quiet. Not because she agreed, but because she realized she was losing. The firefighters finished securing the chainsaw, placing it carefully into an evidence container. One of them shook his head as he did. That could have gone very wrong, he muttered. I looked down at my baby. He was watching everything with wide eyes, his small fingers still gripping my shirt. He didn't understand the words, but he understood tone, safety, presence. I leaned my forehead against his. It's okay, I whispered. Daddy's got you. Karen watched that moment. Something dark flickered across her face. Not regret, resentment. The officer turned to her. Ma'am, he said, I'm going to ask you to turn around. She stiffened. For what? She demanded. For endangering a child with a power tool, he replied. You are being detained while we investigate. Her mouth fell open. You can't do that, she said. I didn't hurt anyone. You nearly did, he answered. She looked around wildly. At the neighbors, at the firefighters, at me. "You're all making a mistake," she said, her voice suddenly smaller. "This will blow over." No one responded, because it wouldn't. I stepped forward one last time. "You thought no one would stop you," I said quietly. "You were wrong." The officer guided her a step away from the porch, and for the first time since she walked up my driveway, Karen had no control at all. Authority rarely vanishes in a single moment. It doesn't explode. It doesn't scream. It erodes. It slips away piece by piece, usually when the people who once feared it realize they don't have to anymore. Karen felt that erosion the moment the police officer stepped closer. Not aggressively, not angrily, just close enough to make it clear that she was no longer in control of the space around her. "Ma'am," the officer said evenly, "I need you to take a step back." Karen hesitated. For years, hesitation had been something other people did around her. Homeowners paused before answering her questions. Parents lowered their voices when she walked by. Contractors waited for her approval before unloading tools. Now she was the one standing still, unsure. "I'm not required to comply with that," she said finally. "I'm on HOA business." The officer didn't raise high voice. "This is no longer OA business," he replied. "This is a public safety issue." The words landed with a dull weight. Public safety. Karen glanced around again, clearly searching for familiar reactions. Nervous smiles, polite nods, the subtle backing away she was used to. Instead, she saw something new. People standing their ground. Mrs. Keller hadn't moved from the edge of the porch. Her arms were crossed tightly, her face pale but resolute. The young couple with the stroller stood shoulder to shoulder, the mother holding her child close while the father stared at Karen with open anger. Phones were still raised, recording, documenting. Karen's authority had always thrived in private moments. Quiet threats, whispered warnings, letters slipped into mailboxes. It did not survive daylight. A firefighter approached the officer and spoke quietly, nodding toward the chainsaw. "Chain brake disengaged," he said. If it had bounced differently, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The officer exhaled slowly and turned back to Karen. "You're very lucky," he said. "That child wasn't injured." Karen bristled. "Exactly," she said quickly. "So there's no harm done." I shifted my baby slightly, feeling his breathing steady against my chest. "No," I said quietly. "There was harm. You just didn't succeed." She turned on me. "You're exaggerating because you're emotional," she snapped. "Any parent would be upset. Any parent," I replied, "would protect their child. You threatened mine." The officer raised a hand, signaling both of us to pause. "Ma'am," he said, "I'm going to ask you some questions. You are not under arrest at this moment, but you are being detained." Karen's eyes widened. "Detained?" she repeated. "For what?" "For reckless endangerment," he replied. "Possibly more, depending on the investigation." Her confidence cracked audibly this time. "That's abs." She said. "I was trying to remove a hazard." The officer glanced at the porch. "The hazard was stationary," he said. "You turned it on." Karen opened her mouth, then closed it. She tried again. "You don't understand how enforcement works," she said, her voice rising. "If people don't follow rules, someone has to act." The officer's expression didn't change. "Acting doesn't mean escalating danger," he said, "especially around a child." Behind him, another patrol car pulled up. A second officer stepped out, clipboard in hand, already scanning the crowd. "Witnesses?" he asked. Hands went up. Not timidly, decisively. "I saw her start it," Mrs. Keller said. "She threw it." The man from 2 houses down added. "It was running," someone else confirmed. "The baby was sleeping," another voice said. Each statement chipped away at Karen's posture. Her shoulders sagged slightly. Her chin dipped. She noticed. She straightened again, forcing defiance back into her stance. "You're all lying," she said sharply. "You're emotional. You don't understand procedure." The second officer began writing. "Everyone here understands what they saw," he said without looking up. Karen laughed weakly. "This is a misunderstanding," she said. "Once my lawyer hears about this—" "That's your right," the first officer replied. "But it doesn't change what happened." The firefighter captain who'd arrived earlier stepped closer to me, lowering his voice. "You want medical to check the baby again?" he asked. I nodded. Please. A paramedic knelt beside me, gentle and calm, checking my son's breathing, his color, his responsiveness. My baby watched her with wide eyes, curious now rather than afraid. He's shaken, she said softly. But he's okay. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Karen saw that moment, saw the care, the concern, the calm professionalism, and something in her shifted a gain, not remorse, realization. This wasn't going away. This is being blown out of proportion, she said, her voice quieter now. We can handle this internally. The officer finally looked at her with clear disbelief. Internally? He repeated. You don't handle this at all. He gestured toward the crowd. This many witnesses means transparency, he continued. You don't get to decide the outcome. Karen clenched her hands. You're enjoying this, she accused. All of you. You like seeing me brought down. No one responded, because it wasn't about her. It was about the baby, about the risk, about the line she had crossed without hesitation. The officer took a step closer. Ma'am, he said, I'm going to need you to turn around. Her head snapped up. Am I under arrest now? She demanded. At this point, he replied, Yes. The word echoed. Arrest. Karen's mouth opened, closed. She looked around one last time, at the neighbors, the firefighters, the phones, the porch where the chainsaw had nearly ended everything. She saw no allies. Slowly, stiffly, she turned around. The cuffs came out. Metal clicked. Final and unmistakable. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Not cheers, not satisfaction, relief. Karen's shoulders slumped as the cuffs closed around her wrists. This is unfair, she muttered. The officer guided her gently but firmly toward the patrol car. No, he said, this is accountability. I watched as she was led away from my porch, away from my child, away from the power she had believed was permanent. My baby rested his head against my shoulder, calm now, trusting again. The chainsaw was gone. The shouting was gone. The illusion of authority was gone, and in its place stood something stronger than fear. The truth. Daylight makes everything clearer. At night, people hide behind shadows. In quiet corners, they whisper, threaten, and pretend power exists because no one is watching closely enough to challenge it. But this was the middle of the afternoon. The sun was still high, casting sharp lines across the porch and driveway. Nothing could be hidden, nothing softened by darkness. Karen stood at the edge of the driveway with her hands cuffed behind her back. Not walking yet, not sitting, waiting. The police officer stood beside her, one hand lightly on her elbow. Not to restrain her, but to remind her that movement was no longer her decision. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, uncomfortable, restless, her earlier confidence gone. The neighborhood had gathered. Not in a mob, not loudly, in clusters. People stood on porches, in driveways, on the sidewalk where my baby's stroller had been only minutes before. Some held phones. Others had lowered them, watching with their own eyes now, as if they wanted to be sure they remembered this moment correctly. Because moments like this mattered. Karen cleared her throat. This is excessive, she said, pitching her voice just loud enough to be heard. A warning would have been sufficient. No one responded. The officer glanced at her briefly. A warning comes before a dangerous act, he said, not after. Karen's lips pressed together. She tried again. I was acting in good faith, she insisted. You can check the HOA bylaws, loud tools, safety hazards. I have a responsibility. You had a responsibility, the officer interrupted calmly, to not create a life-threatening situation. That word, life-threatening, hung in the air. Karen flinched at it. Across the driveway, Mrs. Keller stood with her arms wrapped tightly around herself, her face pale but resolute. She wasn't filming anymore, she wasn't speaking. She was just watching, as if committing the scene to memory so it could never be rewritten later. A man near the sidewalk muttered, I still can't believe she did that. Another replied quietly, I can. Karen heard them, her head turned sharply, eyes flashing. You people are twisting this, she snapped. You don't understand enforcement. A police officer near the patrol car finally looked up from his radio. Ma'am, he said, this is not a debate. The patrol car sat with its back door open, waiting. The sight of it seemed to drain something out of Karen all at once. Her shoulders sagged. The anger in her face gave way to something else. Panic, maybe. Or the realization that this wasn't something she could talk her way out of. "I want to make a statement," she said quickly. "Right now." "You'll have that opportunity," the officer replied. "At the station." Karen shook her head. "No, I want to explain. People need to hear my side." One of the firefighters, still nearby, arms crossed, spoke up quietly. "We all heard it," he said. "And we all saw it." Karen turned toward him. "You're enjoying this," she accused. "All of you. You like seeing me humiliated." No one answered, because this wasn't about humiliation. It was about consequence. The officer placed a hand on Karen's arm and guided her toward the open door of the patrol car. "Please sit," he said. Karen stopped, her heels planted against the pavement. "I'm not getting in there," she said, her voice rising. "This is ridiculous. I've done nothing wrong." The officer did not raise his voice. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "this is not optional." She looked around wildly, searching for someone, anyone, to intervene. No one did. Not the neighbors she'd find, not the people she'd threatened, not the community she'd claimed to protect. She was alone. Slowly, reluctantly, she lowered herself into the back seat. The officer closed the door. The sound was not dramatic, just a solid, unmistakable thud. Final. A quiet ripple moved through the crowd, not cheers, not applause. Something closer to relief. Like a storm cloud passing without destroying everything beneath it. I stood on the porch with my baby held close against my chest. His breathing was calm now, his small body relaxed, the terror already fading into confusion he wouldn't remember. He yawned. The simple, ordinary sound felt surreal. "You're okay," I whispered, more to myself than to him. "You're safe." An officer approached me. "Sir," he said respectfully, "we're going to transport her now. We'll be in touch for a formal statement." I nodded. "Thank you." He hesitated. "For what it's worth," he added. "Your response prevented something much worse." I didn't answer right away, because there was nothing heroic about reacting in time, because the real horror was how close we came. The patrol car's engine started. Karen sat rigid in the back seat, staring straight ahead. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at the neighbors. She didn't look at the porch. The car pulled away slowly, tires crunching softly as it rolled down the street. No sirens, no rush, just the steady movement of accountability leaving the scene. As it disappeared around the corner, people began to disperse. Some nodded at me. Some offered quiet words of support. Some simply looked relieved. Mrs. Keller stepped closer. "I'm so sorry," she said softly. "That must have been terrifying." "It was," I replied. "Thank you for speaking up." She nodded. "We all should have sooner." When the last patrol car left, the street felt strangely empty. The porch was quiet again. The chainsaw was gone. The shouting was gone. The danger was gone. I sat down on the porch steps, my baby still in my arms. He shifted slightly, nestling closer, his trust intact. The sun continued its slow path across the sky. Life resumed. But the memory of what happened, what almost happened, settled deep and permanent. Because daylight had done its job, it had exposed everything, and nothing would ever be hidden again. Quiet does not arrive all at once. It creeps back in slowly, cautiously, like it isn't sure it's welcome yet. The patrol car disappeared around the corner, and with it went the flashing lights, the radios crackling, the tense energy that had wrapped itself around the house like a storm. For a few seconds after it was gone, no one spoke. Even the neighbors seemed unsure whether it was acceptable to breathe normally again. Then a bird chirped, just one, somewhere in the trees near the end of the block. It was such a small sound, but it felt enormous. Proof that the world hadn't ended. Proof that life kept moving forward, even after something terrible almost happened. I stayed on the porch steps with my baby in my arms. He was calm now, not sleeping yet, but no longer crying. His breathing had evened out, and his tiny fingers curled loosely against my shirt instead of gripping it in panic. Every so often he let out a small sigh, the kind babies do when their bodies finally accept that the danger has passed. I rocked him gently, not because he needed it anymore, Because I did. The porch looked different in the afternoon light. The spot where the chainsaw had skidded was empty now, just a faint scuff on the wood that would probably fade with time. The stroller stood where I'd pulled it back, untouched since, as if it didn't quite trust the porch yet either. Mrs. Keller lingered at the edge of the driveway. She hesitated, then walked up slowly. "Is he okay?" she asked softly, as if speaking too loudly might wake fear back up. "He's okay," I said. "Just scared." She nodded, her eyes glistening. "I keep replaying it in my head," she admitted. "How close it was." "So do I said. We stood there in silence for a moment, both of us watching my baby's chest rise and fall. "I'm glad you were right there," she said finally. "So am I." One by one, the neighbors drifted back to their homes. No one rushed, no one joked. They moved with a quiet respect, like people leaving a place where something important had happened. A few nodded to me. One man raised a hand briefly in acknowledgement. No words were necessary. When the street was finally empty again, I carried my baby inside. The house smelled the same as it always did. Clean laundry, coffee from earlier that morning, the faint scent of sawdust still clinging to my clothes, ordinary smells, comforting smells. I laid him down in his crib. He watched me with heavy eyelids, his gaze following my face like he needed to make sure I was still there. "I'm right here," I whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." His eyes closed. This time, when he fell asleep, it was real sleep, deep and peaceful, the kind that comes after a long day when the body finally lets go. I stood there longer than necessary, listening to him breathe. Only when I was certain he was truly resting did I step away. That evening, the phone calls started. The fire department, the police, the HOA board. I didn't answer the HOA call. I didn't need to. Later, an email arrived instead. Short, formal, carefully worded. Karen was removed from her position effective immediately. Her authority revoked, her access to enforcement suspended pending legal action. I read it once, then closed my laptop. It felt strange how little satisfaction it brought. Justice wasn't loud. It was quiet. The next few days passed slowly. Neighbors stopped by with meals we didn't need but appreciated anyway. One left a note on the porch that simply said, "We're glad your baby is safe." Another dropped off a small stuffed bear with a firefighter's helmet stitched onto its head. I placed it in the crib. My baby grabbed it immediately. The investigation moved forward, methodical and calm. Statements retaken. Evidence logged. Procedures followed. I answered questions when needed, then returned home to be a father first. At night, when the house was dark and the world finally slowed down, the memory tried to come back. The sound of the engine roaring to life. The split second where everything could have gone wrong. Those moments lingered at the edges of my thoughts, waiting to be acknowledged. But each time I reminded myself of what mattered most. It didn't end badly. Because I was there. Because someone stopped it. Because accountability arrived in time. A week later, I sat on the porch again. Same steps. Same view of the driveway. My baby slept in my arms, wrapped in a light blanket, the evening air warm and calm. The street was quiet. Peacefully quiet this time. No shouting, no engines, no fear. Just the soft sounds of a neighborhood returning to itself. I watched the sun dip lower, casting long shadows across the lawn. Somewhere down the block, a lawn sprinkler clicked on. A car passed slowly, music playing low through open windows. Normal. I thought about how fragile normal really is, how quickly it can be threatened, and how fiercely it must be protected. Karen had believed she was untouchable. She wasn't. Rules didn't give her the right to endanger a child. Authority didn't excuse recklessness, and fear didn't grant permission to harm. The world corrected her, not with violence, not with chaos, but with consequences. My baby stirred slightly, then settled again, his head resting comfortably against my chest. I looked down at him and felt a quiet, overwhelming gratitude that nearly brought tears to my eyes. He wouldn't remember that afternoon. He wouldn't remember the noise or the fear or how close everything came to falling apart. And that was exactly how it should be. I would remember, so I could make sure it never happened again. The porch creaked softly. As I shifted my weight, the house behind me glowed with warm light, steady and safe. Quiet had returned, and this time, it stayed.